Good evening, everybody. This is a live emergency update on Category 5 Hurricane Melissa that has now stalled out to the southwest of Jamaica. The pressure dipped down to 906 millibars. We're going to look at the latest hurricane reconnaissance aircraft near the center of the storm, but it's very likely that this stall out could be the first sign of a northeastward shift toward the beautiful island nation of Jamaica. Right now, the National Hurricane Center forecast track takes it right over the west side of Jamaica. So it definitely is a shift west since the forecast track yesterday, and a lot of that is due to beta drift, where you get Earth's vorticity advected from north to south on the west side of a stronger storm. And in an environment where there's an absence of steering flow, beta drift will dominate, and that has caused it to meander off to the west like this, just to the south of Jamaica. Jamaica up here off to the northeast of the storm. But notice on the latest scan, it looks like it's stalled out and even wobbled back to the east just a little bit. This could be the first sign of this hurricane about to head off to the northeast toward Jamaica, and all the forecast models are showing that. I was wondering if this was going to be more of a smooth curve around the west side of Jamaica, or was it going to be a sharp turn off to the northeast? And anytime a hurricane is nearly stationary, it is definitely capable of those sharp turns, like is forecast by the forecast models and the National Hurricane Center. And wherever this buzzsaw comes ashore, anywhere to the right of that landfall position is going to have a double-digit storm surge that comes in. Looks like the western half of Jamaica is also going to have probably a couple feet of rainfall up in the higher terrain of Jamaica, just to the northeast of this storm. Looks like the western half of Jamaica is going to get absolutely blasted. You can see that little MCS predecessor rain event just ahead of this big pink donut down here. So this is actually intensifying. You can see that the cloud tops are coming down around this buzzsaw as well. Cloud tops cooling means that they're penetrating higher up into the troposphere, and that means that the convection is more vigorous out there as well. But it has just been meandering off to the west, wobbling quite a bit, and there is an absence of steering flow. It is a very symmetric storm as well, and I would have thought that before that northward shift happened that we would see just a little bit of a meridional elongation of that central dense overcast, but that didn't really happen. It just is still a very symmetric buzzsaw type of a storm right here. That means that it has very little wind shear right now. There's very little steering flow as well, because it's just been nearly stationary, just meandering for days to the south of Jamaica, and it did reach Category 5 intensity last night. And let me show you some of the stadium effect shots of this hurricane today, this historic hurricane here. Here's from the Hurricane Reconnaissance Hurricane Hunter aircraft here, showing you that classic stadium effect that's happening right here. And you can also even see those tilted towers in there, basically stacked together, supercell storms into a donut shape in the eye wall. And that's because you have a lot of convective instability and mainly a lot of wind shear, and it leads to those tilted towers. And you can even get tornadoes within the eye wall there. But these are from the Heroes, the Hurricane Hunter aircraft that are flying in there, collecting data inside of the hurricane to give the models better initialization, and it makes for better model forecasts as well. Here you can see a look at that stadium effect eye, looking down at the ocean as well, all kinds of mesovortices inside of the eye as well. But here you can see the latest satellite imagery. And let me zoom in a little bit. We got to make sure that this is a confirmed stall out and that it's not just a wobble. We've had a lot of wobbles, but it at least has been moving east to west relatively steadily at about 3-4 miles per hour to the south of Jamaica. But it looks like it has stopped and maybe even begun that northeastward turn. And all of this has been happening while it's intensifying, not dissimilar to a tornado with deviant motion. A lot of times when they make that turn off to the north, they will intensify. This is not in an environment with wind shear, but a barotropic environment. You've got a vertically stacked heat engine right here. You can see stadium effect once again, and the cloud tops are definitely cooling around this hurricane, so it is intensifying, and I'm definitely anxiously awaiting the new aircraft reconnaissance data inside of the storm, because I wouldn't be surprised if the pressures even fall below 900 millibars tonight. But you could definitely see a warming of the cloud tops coming in from the northwest. You can see some outflow here that is rotating clockwise, but I've been tracking this line moving from northwest to southeast. That seems to be a warming of the cloud tops, and it even is starting to flatten out. I thought it was about to flatten out the central dense overcast on the northwest side, but it looks like it's actually come back a little bit. But I think that's just a subtle influence of that upstream trough that's over eastern North America that could turn this off to the northeast. But we're just going to have to keep watching it. We'll have to see if this is a robust shift off to the northeast toward western Jamaica, or will it be more of a smooth recurve and maybe just graze the western tip of Jamaica, which would bring the dangerous, dirty side of the storm right over the western edge of the island nation. We tried to make it down here from Indiana, from the Team Dominator Fall Tour, but our flight didn't make it, of course, so we ended up driving back to Oklahoma, and then we're headed back up to Ohio Friday, Saturday, Sunday for 3 events up there in Akron and Columbus. But I'm going to be watching this all night tonight, reloading satellite every 60 seconds. I've been doing that for the last 48 hours, and you can even see some of these supercell storms starting to form just outside on the east side of the central dense overcast. Those are starting to lift north toward Jamaica, and that could start to bring in that flood threat into western Jamaica. It looks like some of that rainfall is starting to move onshore. Trevor Island up to the Negril area. To the north of that is Montego Bay up on the north side of the island. And this track right here looks like it is going to bring some damage to Montego Bay Airport. Kingston further east, looks like there's a chance you might be further east to escape some of the more serious impacts of this storm. But you also never know if it's going to have a more flat turn off to the northeast. I think one thing that we've learned after chasing hurricanes for 30 years is that a lot of times they have surprises all the way up until they make landfall. And when you have an island nation like this that is about the size of Connecticut, any of those small wobbles in either direction could cause 2 very different impacts across Jamaica from east to west. A couple of days ago, we thought it might even hit the east side of the state, maybe even split the gap between Haiti and Jamaica, but then beta drift has been dominating. That's when you advect higher Earth's vorticity air from the higher latitudes north to south on the west side of a hurricane in the northern hemisphere, and that causes it to drift off to the west through beta drift in an absence of steering flow. So once you get some steering, then that'll overwhelm the beta drift, and it looks like that's going to be happening with that trough that's coming through the U.S. right now. But the shape of that trough, the timing of it, and the timing of the cold front, and also the timing of the hurricane relative to the beta drift and the steering mechanisms down here, all of that determines how far east this will go in Jamaica. And you've got Treasure Island down here in the southwest part. You've got Negril up here on the west side of Jamaica. And someone's going to get blasted by big-time rainfall as well. If this kind of comes in northeast like this, anywhere in the western half of Jamaica would get pounded. And there's also the Blue Mountains that run across Jamaica. There's even a 7,500-foot peak to the northeast of Kingston that will undoubtedly get a ton of rainfall, because once this thing turns off to the north, it's going to bring this entire plume of tropical moisture from south to north also across Jamaica, and that's going to dump some big-time rainfall. This is a slow-moving hurricane, stationary right now as we're zooming in on this eye, just wobbling around in there right now. So it does look like there is some steering flow right now that is counterbalancing the beta drift to make this hurricane stationary. So I think that we're going to start to see that steering flow begin to impact this hurricane, and it should turn it off to the northeast, eventually impacting the west side of Jamaica tomorrow. It looks like early tomorrow. Later on tonight, you'll start to get those impacts. Already starting to get impacts here over southwestern Jamaica as this MCS is moving from south to north on the east side of the hurricane. Hurricane Melissa. So let's take a look at the latest HWRF model. This is the 18Z run here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I definitely should be on the ground in Jamaica right now, but did not make it down there. I have some friends that are out there, of course, and this is the 18Z HWRF model that shows that northeastern shift. It does look like it moves due north for a while, and right now at about this time, this is at 21-0, a little bit after that, the hurricane is just a little bit west of this 18Z HWRF run, right about there. So as we step forward, it is very possible that the hurricane might come in just a little bit west of this track, which would take it right over the tip of Jamaica. But this would bring Treasure Island into that dangerous onshore flow in the right quadrant of the hurricane. really where that eye wall makes a 90-degree angle with a coastline. That's where you get the strongest winds because they're coming right off the relatively frictionless Caribbean Sea, and they're also making a 90-degree angle to the coastline. So they pile up that storm surge. You also have a pressure fall near the hurricane, which bubbles up the water a little bit. You can see these supercell storms in this feeder band wrapping it around into that higher terrain up into the mountains here of western Jamaica. These are going to be warm rain processes, big dumpers of rainfall up there. And then it moves off Jamaica and then impacts Cuba here. Still as a major hurricane. Hurricane warnings are in effect for eastern Cuba here as well. But then it just makes a beeline off to the northeast over the southern portions of the Bahamas. But there you can see that hurricane lifting south to north over western Jamaica. Has it at 903 millibars, hitting at about 915, filling in a little bit once it makes landfall. But sure does not look like this weakens at all as it moves off to the north. But I'm going to be excited to see the 0Z HWRF model as well. Let's see what the GFS has for rainfall here, folks. Thanks for tuning in. This live emergency update tracking Category 5 Hurricane Melissa, which is just off to the southwest of Jamaica. And this is the 18Z GFS rainfall. Look at that over the western half of Jamaica, up to 400-500 millimeters up there. That includes Montego Bay Airport as well. Boy, it looks like the 18Z GFS takes that right over the western tip of Jamaica. So that model kind of has it doing a gradual turn to the northwest, eventually off to the north, and then continues over eastern Cuba, southern Bahamas. We'll expand out, and then we can take a look at the upstream trough, and we'll assess its shape. This is it right here, and you can definitely see the southern fringe of the westerlies down there to the southeast of Florida. I think that trough is sliding off to the southeast, but it's basically this general troughing over the eastern U.S. and these westerlies that eventually pick up the hurricane. But it was just a little bit too far south to feel its influence until right about now. Continental view is best. You can see the hurricane there as well. Hurricane Melissa down just to the southwest of Jamaica, stalled out, and you can definitely see an absence of steering flow down there. Here's your main trough off to the northeast, and watch this evolve with time. It really isn't sagging or digging that far south, is it? But you can see in general the steering is to push this off to the northeast because this trough is off the eastern seaboard here. Doesn't want to just lift due north toward the base of the trough, but it wants to get deflected off to the east. And it just gets picked up by a glancing blow of that trough. There's the kicker that comes around the base of the trough that really digs by midweek and is going to launch that hurricane off to the north. Look at that thing get picked up. It tries to wrap a little bit closer to Newfoundland as it gets picked up by the jet. Extratropical transition there from tropical to extratropical. But this is the 18Z GFS. Let's zoom in a little bit more closely. See what the GFS does with it. Still northwest through 21Z today. And then it stops right about now, right at about 0Z. And it looks like it wants to move this hurricane due north after it stalls out. The GFS, at least, continues it off to the due north until it gets right up to the tip of Jamaica. And then it starts to turn off to the northeast. So depending on how long that hurricane moves off to the north and the impacts of beta drift that will want to continue to push it off to the west a little bit, I think it's probably going to hit that western tip of Jamaica there. And that would bring the dangerous side of this hurricane across the rest of the island. At least the central and western half. Almost lost my pad thai there. So it did move northwest, and then it got west of the tip of Jamaica. So this is a pretty good initialization by the GFS model. And it's interesting that it does take it off to the due north. Here you can see the trough. Big westerlies over Florida. It's south of that wind shear. That's why it's thriving down here over the Caribbean Sea. Water temperature is very warm down there as well. But it continues northwest until 0Z, which is right about now, and then turns. And that's exactly what we're seeing on satellite imagery. H-Wharf actually curls it northeast right at the last second up there. Treasure Island could be in play. Negril looks to be more of a sure bet right now to get in the inner core of that hurricane. Well, that's the GFS model. Beta drift is pulling higher Earth's vorticity north to south, higher latitudes down to lower latitudes in the west side of the hurricane. And that is what has caused it to meander from east to west to the south of Jamaica. But that trough didn't really barrel in until a little bit later in the forecast period. Even tomorrow into Wednesday is when you really start to get an amplification of that upstream trough. But you can see the steering up here off to the northeast, north eventually, and then northeast as it crosses over Cuba. I was even thinking about going to Cuba to chase the storm, but it's just a little more difficult out there to chase. There you can see the deepening trough to the northwest of it, picking up that system. It's going to accelerate, start to encounter some wind shear here as well. The wind field will expand as it lifts off to the north, but there's that trough axis that protected the United States from this hurricane, certainly. But it might draw it north toward the west side of Jamaica here. Let's see what it did here in the latest reload. That is definitely stationary now. The last couple of scans. Maybe even a wobble off to the east. And look at these cloud tops. Cool, very vigorous convection. This is a central dense overcast. The buzzsaw portion here. CDO. And I've been looking for any disruption of the CDO today. Any elongation in the north-south for a sign of a northward turn. And it seems like when this thing started to intensify and the cloud tops cooled and the storm even expanded a little bit, it seems like it's about to begin a northward turn. And you can even see some healthier cloud elements off to the east, probably feeding off of the greater ocean air temperature difference at night. But you definitely do have this cluster of supercells that's moving south to north toward western Jamaica as well, kind of on the nose of a little dry air out there. And this is probably the beginning of the flooding event here. That's going to just hammer the higher terrain of central into western Jamaica. You might even get other bands that set up further east that could cause a flooding disaster near the Kingston area, as well onshore flow in the presence of big rainfall. I have seen, though, that the forecast total rainfall for the Kingston area has been downgraded from 40 inches to about 10 inches so far, but that's just because of the further west track that's happening out here. And again, with this counterclockwise spin, you usually get the advection of higher vorticity, Earth's vorticity, from higher latitudes down to lower latitudes, and that is what has caused this east to west wobble, slow drift of the storm. But now that it's stopped, it might be starting to feel a little bit of a steering mechanism with that trough, which is further north, the base of it near Florida. But the GFS model shows this thing moving off to the due north and then curling northeast right at the last second, right toward the tip of Jamaica. H-Wharf model just a little bit to the east of that, right in between, just to the northwest of Treasure Island, where that comes ashore. But the models are definitely starting to converge around this northeastward shift, taking it right up into western Jamaica. But One thing I know for sure after chasing hurricanes for 30 years is that these things are full of surprises. And I wouldn't be surprised if this one has more surprises all the way up to landfall, which is tomorrow. But watch out, western Jamaica here. Big predecessor rainfall event just outside of the CDO. And then we're going to have to see what this buzzsaw does. I wonder if it's going to drift even a little bit further west. Looks like it's not going to make it to 79 degrees west longitude. It crossed 78 degrees west longitude this morning, was located in the southeast quadrant of this latitude longitude block, and has really only made it basically to the center portion of this longitude. So I think that is the furthest west that this hurricane is likely going to make it. And we'll just have to see, does it move north and then northeast like the GFS shows? Or does it just make a beeline all the way straight up to the southwest coast of Jamaica? That's what we're going to have to wait and find out. Let's take a look at the latest. TropicalTidbits.com is an incredible website to track these. Looks like a lot of people are using it right now. He's getting some website reload here. Dr. Levi Cohen. So this mission is in the storm. Looks like it's got a 910 millibar minimum pressure. I also heard that the highest flight level winds that have ever been recorded were measured inside of this hurricane. 155 knot wind speeds there. Flight level peak, 10-second wind speed. You can see the eye there. Surface pressure dropping down to 910 millibars on this. So, and it looks to be intensifying. So I think on these next couple passes, I wouldn't be surprised if they even find some lower pressures. I guess yesterday they had to turn around just because the flight was just a little bit too dangerous out there. This has also been one of the driest eyes ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin. And a dry eye means that you have a lot of sinking motion in there, a lot of drying out inside the eye, inside of the ring of convection, which is basically stacked together supercell storms into a donut configuration. But definitely the heroes, hurricane hunters, are in there sampling this core. Looks like they're about to make another penetration of the center. But watching this very closely, I want to see if it's going to drift any more west or if that's done. And it may just sit there and then start to lift off to the north and eventually the northeast. Looks like it's pushing a little bit east, if anything. So I would say that a direct hit on Jamaica is pretty likely because of these latest satellite updates. Almost a certainty. And this is going to bring life-threatening impacts to Jamaica. Big problems out there. Catastrophic wind damage, flooding, infrastructure collapse out there. The airports, Montego Bay, will likely be shut down for a very long time. Well, they do have a lot of concrete structures out here in Jamaica. They have been through hurricanes before, but it looks like this is going to be, if it makes landfall anywhere near its intensity now, this would be the strongest ever to hit Jamaica. And it does look like it stopped right in the northwest quadrant of that 1 degree by 1 degree latitude longitude block. I was wondering if it was going to make it up here. That was kind of my benchmark to see if it might miss Jamaica to the west, but it looks like it stalled out just to the southeast of that. And I think that that would bring it in right into the western tip of Jamaica. Of course, I'm hoping that it misses, but it looks like it is going to be coming right up into the southwestern section of Jamaica. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this live emergency update. Our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Jamaica. It is going to be a very dangerous night tonight, and especially tomorrow, Tuesday. Could be total destruction out there in the western half of Jamaica. Hunker down, everybody. Stay safe. This is going to be one of the worst hurricanes to ever hit Jamaica. And I'm going to continue to reload the satellite here every 60 seconds through this evening. Never stop chasing.